Here's August 2015, questions 32 to 37. Number 32, Jackson is starting an exercise program. The first day, he will spend 30 minutes on a treadmill. He will increase his time on the treadmill by 2 minutes each day. Write an equation for T of D, the time in minutes on the treadmill on day D. Well, instead of Y equals, you're going to use what they give you, which is T of D. And 2 is going to be the time in minutes each day that he's going to increase. And this is going to start happening after the first day. So it's going to be D minus 1 plus 30. So here's our initial value of 30. And each time we're going to increase 2 minutes from the day before. So that's why we have to have the D minus 1. So there's our equation. And when it says find T of 6, the minutes he will spend on the treadmill on day 6, well, if I plug it into my formula, T of 6 will equal 2 times 6 minus 1 plus 30. So I'll have 2 times 5 plus 30. 2 times 5 is 10. Plus 30 would give us 40 minutes. That's how long he will spend on the treadmill on day 6. Here's question 33. It says graph f of x, which equals x squared, and g of x, which equals 2 to the x, for x values that are greater than or equal to 0 on the set of axes below. So what I'm going to do is I already labeled some of my x and y values that I'll need, and I'm going to write my t-tables for f of x and for g of x. So starting with 0, I'm going to go just up until 6. For both x values. And my y values, f of x, if I type this into my calculator, I'll get 0, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and 36. I just have to square my x. And for g of x, if I type this into my calculator, 2 to the power of x, I'll end up with 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. Okay. So now we have to graph. So there's my graph of f of x and g of x, and it says state which function f of x or g of x has a greater value when x is equal to 20. Well, to find when x is equal to 20, we could just plug 20 in for x for both equations. So for f of x, if I plug 20 in for my function and I type in 20 squared, I will end up with 400. And for g of x, if I type in 2 to the power of 20, I will end up with, let's see here, 1,048,576. So, which function, f of x or g of x, has a greater value when x is equal to 20? Well, that will be the answer of g of x. And it says justify your reasoning. Well, 400 versus this 1,048,576. So clearly, that number is much larger. So g of x will be your answer. Number 34, solve for x algebraically. So we have 7x minus 3 times 4x minus 8 is less than or equal to 6x plus 12 minus 9x. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this negative 3 and I'm going to distribute it to every term inside the parentheses. So I'll start with writing 7x minus 12x plus 24 is less than or equal to. Over here I have some like terms. 6x minus 9x is a negative 3x plus 12. Okay, combined like terms on the left-hand side, I will end up with a negative 5x plus 24 less than or equal to negative 3x plus 12. I always like to have my x's on the left-hand side of the inequality, so I'm going to add 3x so that my x's will be on the left. I'll have negative 2x and plus 24 less than or equal to 12. Then I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides to get my x's alone. I'm left with the negative 2x is less than or equal to negative 12. I have to divide by negative 2, which means that I'm going to flip my inequality because I'm dividing by negative. So x will then be greater than or equal to 6. This is my answer for the first part of 34. Now in the second part, if x is a number in the interval 4, 8, okay, so that means that if you drew this on a number line and you had 4 and 8, so you had 5, 6, 7, you would have closed circles at 4 and 8, and you don't have to draw this picture, but you can, and then you would have a line in between. So that's your interval. State all the integers that satisfy the given inequality and explain how you determine these values. Well, the numbers that would work would be starting with 6, 7, and 8. Because x must be greater than or equal to 6 and largest integer is 8 in my interval. So that's why I'm only using 6, 7, and 8. 35. The volume of a large can of tuna fish can be calculated using the formula V equals pi r squared h. Write an equation to find the radius r in terms of V and h. Well, what I can do first is divide both sides by pi h to get r alone. Then I'm left with V over pi h equals r squared. The opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. So r will equal to the square root of V over pi h. Determine the diameter to the nearest inch of a large can of tuna fish that has a volume of 66 cubic inches, that's V, a height of 3.3, that's my h, my height. So if I plug it into the formula for r equals, I'll have the square root of 66 divided by pi times 3.3. If I type that into my calculator, I'll end up with the square root of 6.3662, which means that r is roughly 2.5, and we're talking about inches, and it says find the diameter. Now, this is the radius. Your radius is 2.5. Diameter is twice as big as the radius, so if I take 2.5 and I multiply it by 2, I'll end up with a diameter equal to 5 inches. 36. The table below shows the attendance at a museum in select years from 2007 to 2013. State the linear regression equation represented by the data table when x equals 0 is used to represent the year 2007. Well, that means that 2007 is really going to be represented by 0. 2008 would be represented by a 1. 2009 is 2. 2011 would be 4. And 2013 would be 6. So I'm going to type this into my list 1 and the attendance into list 2 out of my calculator when I hit stat. And then I'm going to calculate a linear regression equation, which I go stat, scroll over to calc, and it's choice 4. And I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth, and I'll end up with values of y equals 0.16x plus 8.27. The next part of this says state the correlation coefficient. Remember, correlation coefficient is your r value. It's on the same screen that we just found our equation on, and it says to the nearest hundredth. So r is equal to 0.97 to the nearest hundredth, and it says determine whether this data suggests a strong or weak association. Well, this is a strong association since r is close to the number 1. 37. A rectangular picture measures 6 inches by 8 inches. Simon wants to build a wooden frame for the picture so that the framed picture takes up a maximum area of 100 square inches on his wall. The pieces of wood that he uses to build the frame all have the same width. Write an equation or an inequality that could be used to determine the maximum width of the pieces of wood for the frame that Simon could create. Well, equation deals with equal sign, and an inequality either deals with like less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And since it says one or the other, you can choose which one you want to do. And I'm going to choose to do an equation. So if you need to, you might want to draw a picture of what they're asking you to find. So we have a rectangular picture, and Simon wants to build a wooden frame around it. So we have something like this. Okay, here's our picture in the middle, and our wooden frame is surrounding it. So the picture is a 6 by 8. All right, so that is 6 by 8, and the wooden frame around it is, let's see, it all has the same width. So if we just call this width right here of a distance of x, that means that this width down here is also x, this width is over here is x, and this over here is also x. So if we could find the area is 100. Remember, area equals your length times your width. Well, the length of the picture plus the frame would be 8 plus, we have 2 x's, that's our length, times our width, which is 6, plus we have 2 x's, equals our area of 100 square inches. That is the equation. Explain how your equation or inequality models the situation. Well, just like I said, the length of the picture plus the frame is equal to this 8 plus 2x. And the width of the same thing, the picture and the frame, is equal to this 6 plus 2x. Okay, and we know that our area formula, like I wrote above, is equal to our length times our width. In the last part of this question, it says, solve the equation or inequality to determine the maximum width of the pieces of wood used for the frame to the nearest tenth of an inch. I'm going to go on to the next page so that I have more room to write. And here was my original equation. It was 8 plus 2x times 6 plus 2x equals 100. And when I double distribute, I will end up with 48 plus 16x plus 12x plus 4x squared is equal to 100. And if I move things around with my x squared first, 4x squared, plus combine like terms, so I'll have 28x plus 48 equals 100. I want to subtract 100 because remember, when you have your x squared, you want to set it all equal to 0. So then I'm left with negative 52, all equals 0, and I can use the quadratic formula now, where my a is 4, my b is 28, and my c is negative 52. So x will equal a negative 28 plus or minus the square root of 28 squared minus 4 times negative 52, all divided by 2 times 4. Remember, what you're going to type into your calculator is what is inside the radical, and that turns into one number, 1,616, and it's all divided by 8. And what we'll end up with in the end is 1.5 as our final answer, or we'll have x equals a negative 8.5, but we can't have a negative length or width, so we're going to reject that, and we're going to keep 1.5 inches. And that's our final answer.